The morning of my 75th birthday felt heavy, like a weight was on my chest. My doctor had recently said my heart was tired, and that word stuck in my head. I stood in my study looking at a photo of me and my wife Eleanor in Italy. She has been gone 5 years now, and the big house is too quiet without her. My kids were coming over later for a small party. Robert, my eldest, is a lawyer in New York. Amanda, my daughter, has a fancy interior design business in Los Angeles. And Kevin, my youngest, is still trying to make a tech startup work in Austin, with my help. I loved them all so much. I always thought everything I worked for, my hardware business I built from nothing, was for them. It was the family legacy. I decided to rest my eyes for just a minute on the old sofa before they arrived. I woke up to the sound of their voices in the foyer. But they weren't happy. They sounded angry and sharp. I got up to go say hello, my heart already sinking. I just wanted a nice day. But something in their tone, a coldness I knew from business deals, made me stop. I stayed hidden in my study, the door open a crack, and I listened. I know I should not have. It was a coward's move. But I had to know. I heard Robert's wife, Jennifer, say they needed to be practical. That word felt like a knife. Then it got worse. They were not talking about me. They were talking about my things. My life's work. It was a brutal argument over my stuff. Robert said he should get the Italy house because he was the oldest. Amanda yelled that he would just sell it, that she deserved it more because she had good taste. Kevin, my soft-hearted boy, shocked me. He argued about money and the business, saying he deserved more because the others had their college paid for. Their husbands and wives joined in, a chorus of pure greed. They complained I would not talk about my will. Then Robert said the words that broke my world. He said with a cold laugh, I know. The old man is hanging on just to spite us. If he had just had the decency to follow Mom, we would not be in this limbo. Decency. He thought I should have had the decency to die after my wife. The pain in my chest was real, but it was my heart breaking. These were not my children. They were vultures waiting for me to fall. All my hot anger drained away, leaving something cold and hard and determined. I took a deep breath, straightened my sweater, and walked calmly into the living room. The room went completely silent. Their faces turned white. They looked like guilty kids caught in a terrible act. I did not really look at them. I looked at the greedy strangers wearing their faces. I walked past them to the dining table where a beautiful, expensive cake sat with Happy Birthday Dad written on it. I picked up the whole cake plate. I looked each of them in the eye, Robert, Amanda, Kevin. I held their gaze until they looked away. I did not yell. My voice was low and steady and empty of all feeling. Do not worry about the will, I said. It is already done. I did not throw the cake. I did not explain. I turned and walked out of the room, carrying the untouched cake with me. I left them standing there in the silence, surrounded by the wreckage of their own greed. The next morning I woke up at 5. I had not slept much, but I had not tossed and turned. I had just lain there in the dark, next to Eleanor's photo, and made plans. The sadness was a rock in my gut, but it was now inside a shell of cold, hard resolve. My first call was to my lawyer and old friend, Arthur Jenkins. I did not give him details. I just said I needed to see him today to change my will. He heard my tone and did not ask questions. I put on my best suit. It felt like armor. The house was silent. My phone had been buzzing all night with calls and texts from the kids. I did not read them. I turned the phone off. I drove to Arthur's office. He has a great view of the lake. He looked worried and asked what happened. I sat down and told him everything. I repeated their conversation word for word. I told him about the fighting over my things and Robert's comment about me having the decency to die. Arthur's face went from concern to grim understanding. Then I told him I wanted to disinherit them all. Arthur tried to talk me out of it. He said it was extreme, that they were my children, that they spoke in private frustration. He said this would break the family forever. I looked out at the cold, grey lake. I thought of Eleanor. She would be heartbroken, but she would also be furious at their disrespect. I looked back at Arthur. That family was already shattered, I said. I am just sweeping up the pieces. They were not frustrated. They were calculating. Do it. That was the moment. I was making a clear choice, and I knew it meant no going back. The legal work started. The new will was written. My entire estate, everything, the business, the money, the stocks, my house, the Italy house, all of it was to be sold after I die. Every single dollar left, after bills and taxes, would go to the Whiskers and Purrs Feline Rescue. That is the local cat shelter. A nice volunteer named Linda comes by every week with a therapy cat to visit me. They are the only ones who visit without wanting something. They ask how I am, not what I have. I signed the new will with a steady hand. It was done. It was legal. I felt a hollow finality. As I stood to leave, Arthur looked at me. They will fight this, Franklin, he said. You know that. Robert is a lawyer. They will say I pressured you or that you were not in your right mind. I just nodded. I expected nothing less. I drove home, that hollow feeling growing. When I pulled in, I saw all three of their cars. They had all come together to confront me. I took a deep breath and walked inside. They were in the living room, the same room where it happened. Any fake concern was gone, replaced by pure panic and fury. Dad, what the hell is this? Robert demanded, stepping too close. Your lawyer called me. You cannot do this. It is a mistake, right, Dad? Amanda pleaded, but her eyes were cold. You were upset. We are sorry. But this is insane. Kevin just stared at me, looking betrayed. You are giving everything to a cat shelter, he said. I stood my ground, silent, letting their words hit me. This just proved I was right. They were not here for me. They were here for the money. Robert got right in my face, his calm lawyer act gone. Listen to me, old man, he snarled. You are not getting away with this. I will drag you through every court. I will have you declared mentally incompetent so fast your head will spin. We will prove you have lost your marbles. This is not over. Then he turned, and they all stormed out. The front door slammed shut. I was left standing alone in the foyer, the threat of a long, nasty legal war hanging in the air. I knew what I had to do next. I had to prove I was saner than I had ever been. I stood there in the silence for a long time after they left. Robert's words, mentally incompetent, were just hanging there. But instead of making me scared or sad, they just made me more determined. I was not a confused old man. I was a man who had been betrayed, and I was thinking clearer than I had in years. I went to my study and turned on my computer. The first thing I did was write an email to my doctor, Dr. Evans. I told him I wanted a full checkup on my brain. I said for my own peace of mind and for any future legal needs, I wanted a professional to test my memory and my thinking. I wanted it on paper, right now, that my mind was sharp. This was my first move. I was not going to wait for them to attack. I was building my defenses early. Then I called Arthur back. I told him they came and threatened me with the incompetence thing. He was not surprised. He said it was a common dirty trick in family money fights. I told him about the email to my doctor. He was quiet for a second and then said that was a very smart, proactive move. It made their argument look weak before they even started. I also told him I was going to start a video diary. Every day I would talk to a camera about my life, my business decisions, my reasons for changing the will. I would prove with dates and details that I knew exactly what I was doing. Arthur loved the idea. He told me to also keep a handwritten journal of every talk with the kids and to save every text message. I was building a fortress of evidence. A few days later, I went to see Dr. Evans. He asked me a lot of questions and had me do puzzles and memory tests. At the end, he told me that for my age, my mind was in great shape. There were no signs of dementia or anything wrong. He wrote up a formal report for me and Arthur. It felt like winning a small battle. That night, I set up a small camera on my desk. The first video was strange. I just stared for a minute. Then I started talking. My name is Franklin Moss. Today is October 12th. I am 75 years old. I began to tell the whole story from the beginning. I talked about Eleanor, about building the business, about my love for my kids, and then I told exactly what I heard on my birthday. I spoke calmly and clearly for 20 minutes. It felt good to get it out. It also felt powerful, like I was creating my own truth that they could not break. The texts from my kids kept coming. They changed from fake sorry messages to real threats, just like I knew they would. Robert's texts were all legal talk about protecting the family's interests. Amanda's tried to make me feel guilty, saying I was shaming my wife's memory and hurting my grandchildren. Kevin's were shorter, just begging me to talk. I did not answer a single one. I just saved them all. About a week after my birthday, a formal letter came from a law firm in New York, Robert's firm. It was full of big legal words, but the point was simple. It said they were very worried about my recent behavior. It said I was acting erratic and was isolated. It said they were going to ask a court to put me under a conservatorship, which meant they would get control of my money because I could not handle it myself. They claimed my lawyer, Arthur, was influencing me. I read the letter at my kitchen table and felt calm. This was what we were waiting for. I called Arthur and read it to him. Right on schedule, he said. Now we hit back. He said he would send my doctor's report and a copy of my first video diary to their lawyers. He would write a response that accused them of financial elder abuse for trying to steal my money with threats. We were not just going to block their attack. We were going to counter-attack harder. I spent the rest of the day in my garden, pulling weeds. The physical work felt good. It cleared my head. This was my life. This was my mind. And this was my money. I was not going to let my vulture children take any of it from me. The war had officially started, and for the first time since Eleanor died, I felt a strong purpose. I was fighting for what was right. A few days later, I got a call from Amanda's daughter, my granddaughter, Chloe. She is 10. Her voice was small on the phone. "Grandpa, are you okay? Mom and Dad are really upset. They said you are giving all your money to cats and that we might not be able to go to our summer camp." My heart squeezed tight. They were using my granddaughter to get to me. This was a new low. I kept my voice soft. "Hi, sweetheart. Do not you worry about summer camp. That is all grown-up stuff. Grandpa is just fine. I love you very much." "I love you too, Grandpa," she said, and then her mother, Amanda, got on the phone quickly and the call ended. I felt a fresh wave of anger. Using a child. It was disgusting. I wrote down every word of the conversation in my journal. The next week, I got a visit from Kevin. He came alone. He looked tired. He said he did not want to fight. He said he understood why I was hurt. But he begged me to see it from their side. He said they were worried about me, that Arthur was filling my head with ideas, that leaving everything to a cat shelter was proof I was not thinking straight. He said, "Dad, please, just come to family therapy with us. Let us talk this out." I looked at my son. Part of me wanted to believe he was sincere. But I remembered his voice from my birthday, arguing about his fair share. I saw this for what it was, another tactic. They had tried threats, then guilt through my granddaughter, and now they were trying softness and concern. I stayed calm. I told him I was not going to therapy. I told him my decision was final and it was made with a clear head. I said, "You should go now, Kevin." He looked defeated and left. I wrote it all down in the journal. The date, the time, what he said, what I said. Arthur filed our powerful response to their legal petition. A week later, we got their reply. It was weaker. They did not drop the case, but they backed off the strong language about me being incompetent. Now they were just asking the court to make sure I was not being unduly influenced. It was a retreat. Arthur called me, his voice upbeat. "We have them on the ropes, Franklin. Their case is weak and they know it. They are just trying to drag this out now, hoping you will get tired and settle." I told him I would never get tired. I would never settle. This was not about money anymore. This was about principle. I continued my video diaries. I talked about Eleanor, about our life, about my hopes for my children that were now shattered. I talked about the cat shelter and how the volunteers were kinder to me than my own family. I was creating a record no court could ignore. I was proving I was a man of sound mind and strong heart, a man who had been deeply wronged and was taking a stand. The fight was far from over, but I was winning. And with every passing day, my resolve grew harder and colder, like stone. The fight settled into a kind of quiet, nasty routine. The legal papers kept flying back and forth, but the real battle was happening in the silence. My children had become strangers who lived in my phone, their texts and occasional voicemails just more evidence for my growing file. I kept up my video diaries every single night. I started talking about things from years ago, details about the business, the exact price I paid for my first store, the name of the banker who gave me my first loan. I was proving my memory was a steel trap. I even filmed myself doing my taxes by hand, explaining each deduction out loud to the camera. It was boring, but it was powerful proof that I was sharp. Arthur said the other side was getting frustrated. They thought I was an old man who would crack under pressure or get confused. Instead, they were getting a retired businessman who was better at paperwork than they were. Then, Robert tried a new trick. He showed up at my house with a man I had never seen before. Robert introduced him as Dr. Miller, a geriatric specialist. Robert said, very calmly, that he was just concerned and wanted a second opinion on my health from a real expert. I stood in my doorway and did not let them in. I looked at this Dr. Miller and I said, I already have a doctor. His name is Dr. Evans. He says my mind is perfect. If you want to talk to me, you can do it through my lawyer. Robert's face got tight with anger. He said, Dad, do not be difficult. This is for your own good. I just repeated myself. Talk to my lawyer. Then I closed the door and locked it. I leaned against the door and my heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was from victory. I had stood my ground. I went straight to my journal and wrote down everything, the date, the time, what they were wearing, what they said. I felt like a detective building a case against my own family. A few days later, I got a letter from Amanda. It was a real paper letter, in her fancy handwriting. She did not ask for money. She talked about when she was a little girl and how I used to take her to the park. She wrote about how much she missed her mom and how she was worried I was pushing everyone away. She said the family was falling apart and it did not have to be this way. For a minute, I held the letter and I felt a terrible sadness. I remembered that little girl. I remembered pushing her on the swings. A part of me wanted to call her and make it all stop. But then I remembered the woman in my living room, screaming that she deserved my vacation home. I remembered her using my granddaughter to make me feel guilty. This letter was just another weapon, a softer one. It was designed to break my heart instead of my will. I did not throw the letter away. I put it in a clear plastic sleeve and added it to my evidence box. I wrote a journal entry about receiving it and my thoughts. I was not going to let them manipulate me. The court date for the first hearing was getting closer. Arthur said it was mostly a formality, but it was important. The judge would look at both sides and decide if their case had enough merit to continue. Arthur was confident we would win and get their petition thrown out. He said my doctor's report and my video diaries were like gold. He said, Franklin, you have done everything right. You have built a fortress around yourself. The night before the hearing, I could not sleep. I went into the living room and looked at Eleanor's picture. I talked to her. I said, I am so sorry it has come to this, Ellie. I am so sorry our children turned out this way. But I cannot let them win. I will not let them pretend they loved me just to get my money. It is the last thing I can do for us. The next morning, I put on my best suit. Arthur picked me up in his car. We did not talk much on the way to the courthouse. When we walked in, I saw them. Robert, Amanda, and Kevin were all there with their fancy lawyers. They looked like a team, a united front. They did not look at me. We all went into the courtroom and sat on opposite sides. It was a cold, quiet room. The judge came in. He was an older man with a tired face. He listened as Robert's lawyer stood up and started talking about his deep concern for his father, about erratic behavior, about isolation and undue influence. He made it sound like I was a helpless old fool being tricked by a cat charity. Then it was Arthur's turn. He stood up. He did not yell. He spoke calmly and clearly. He told the judge that this was a simple case of greed. He talked about the successful business I built. He mentioned my doctor's report confirming my sound mind. He held up a transcript from one of my video diaries. He said, "Your Honor, my client is not confused. He is heartbroken. He is a man who heard his children wishing he was dead so they could get his money. He is protecting his legacy from the very people who betrayed him." Then Arthur did something I did not expect. He looked at my children and said, "The petitioners claim they want to protect their father. But their first move was to threaten him and try to have him declared incompetent. That is not love. That is financial abuse." The word abuse hung in the air. I saw Robert flinch. The judge listened. He looked at the papers in front of him for a long time. Then he looked at Robert and his lawyer. He said he had read Dr. Evans's report. He said the evidence of sound mind was very strong. He said the petition for a temporary conservatorship was denied. He said their case, based on what he had seen, was exceptionally weak. He said if they wanted to continue to contest the will itself, they were free to do so, but he advised them to consider the costs, both financial and emotional. It was over. Just like that. We had won the first major battle. As we walked out of the courtroom, my children and their lawyers were huddled together, talking in low, angry voices. Robert finally looked at me. His face was pure hatred. He did not say a word, but his eyes said it all. This was not over. They were not going to give up. But as I walked out into the sunlight with Arthur, I felt a weight lift. I had faced them down in court and I had won. I had proven I was not a weak old man. I was still Franklin Moss, and I was still in charge of my own life.